Well, we're already seeing such incredible representation from all over the earth. Really excited to have you all here dialing into the kickoff for Accelerate Energy series by New Energy Nexus. We have a really exciting hour and a half scheduled for all of us, and really want to thank you for making the time. And if you are dialing in, and we're all dealing with fun time zone stuff. So we're live streaming this as well, so that those who aren't able to join us in this moment can also go ahead and check it out on YouTube. So with that, I will pass it over to Danny Kennedy to introduce this and get us started, and we'll kick off Accelerate Energy series. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Neha and Olivia and Hendrik and the whole team that has pulled together the Accelerate Energy series. So this is our big effort at New Energy Nexus to replace an annual event we've been organizing for the last 5 years, which we call the Accelerate Energy Summit, with a series of these fantastic, highly curated, closed conversations about discrete parts of how we advance decarbonization and energy uplift for all, which we'll get into in a minute. But I wanted to actually kick off and just sort of reflect on what an amazing thing it is to have people from all around the world dialing in, speakers from California and the Philippines, and we'll have many more through the next 6 weeks, and how we all really reside wherever we are on land that was once taken care of and stewarded by Indigenous communities. And we want, as New Energy Nexus, to sort of respect that even in our virtual global networked reality. And wherever you are, myself in California, in Ohlone territory around the San Francisco Bay. If I was in Australia, I might be in the Durag family place. Wherever you are, we should remember the people that brought that place forward and stewarded it for so long, and pay our respects to their elders, both past, present, and future, and acknowledge that many of those lands were never ceded, they were taken. And we know that as we work in the energy economy to build something better into the future. And we'll talk a bit about that as the mission of New Energy Nexus. I'm actually going to share my screen right now, because I want to show you a PowerPoint just to explain who we are at New Energy Nexus. I have the privilege of being the CEO of this amazing organization of 70 people around the world, currently working on our mighty mission, we call it, to support diverse entrepreneurs to drive innovation and build equity into the global clean energy economy. But when we talk about that, obviously startups and entrepreneurs often get, confused with high-tech disruption and all that stuff, which is part of the package and part of the work we do. But also building equity is this attempt to redress some of the injustices that the energy economy has really wrought around the world for centuries. Actually, if you think about the dispossession of people and places throughout the fossil fuel value chain, from the extraction all the way through pollution and production of energy and the disposal of waste and all the rest of it. We believe the clean energy transition we're in the middle of right now, this decade, this decisive decade in the struggle on climate change, is also a chance to fix some of that history and make for a much better place where we can be serving full service AC electricity to everyone, and modern mobility services, without some of the harms that history created. And that's kind of our purpose in supporting the startups that we support, so that we can achieve a vision, a greater goal that all of us share, of 100% clean energy for 100% of the population. And obviously that means energy access right now, where 1 billion people are still without the electricity most of us on this call take for granted, and 3.5 billion still have unreliable electricity services. And going forward in the future, we'll have generations of people we need to move around and provide with all the things, the entertainment, the education, the online services, with electricity that will be clean and renewably powered. We do it with an incredible crew of folk from some 10 countries now around the world. I just wanted to show you who we are before I said what we do or where we do it or how we do it, because I think the faces and the team that we've grown over the last few years out of the California Clean Energy Fund to become New Energy Nexus are driving that mighty mission to support entrepreneurs around the world to drive innovation, build equity in the global clean energy economy. And this crew are doing yeoman's work right now in the world. We've looked at 2,000 entrepreneurs through our programs in due diligence. We've invested in dozens of them. We've supported hundreds of them just this year in the midst of COVID because of the creativity and genius of these folk. And you'll see some of them in a video shortly. We're in 10 cities around the world, started in California, as I mentioned, but now we've spanned the globe in markets that matter from a climate point of view, the places with high energy demand, young populations, growing need for electricity services. And we're really trying to meet that with all the clean energy technology and know-how and business models and financial innovation we can muster. We also are affiliated with 90 other organizations and ecosystem support groups and accelerators and funds in 30 different countries that help our entrepreneurs meet that mission. And obviously this is true clean energy. This is not any misunderstanding about gas or false bridges and false solutions. We're trying to jump now to the place that even the International Energy Agency acknowledges we can be by a decade or two from now, fully solar powered and wind powered and clean energy powered economies, driving around in electric vehicles, using mass mobility and micro mobility and public transit and active transit to get people and things around the world, rather than the dumb and dirty and inefficient fossil fuel based economy which we've inherited. That transition, that disruption is what our startups and entrepreneurs are driving. And we support them by launching them through ideation exercises, the classic kind of fare of the incubator community like hackathons. We accelerate them with training programs and curriculum around the world. We fund them. We have 5 funds in action currently, debt, equity, grant funds of different kinds, and we scale them. We're soon to announce another 9 companies in New York for our late stage commercialization program there in energy efficiency, which you'll hear about as well in the course of the Accelerate Energy Summit. And our teams work towards the vision by laddering up towards our brave goal of 100,000 startups that we want to support actively this decade. We've just begun. As I said, we've looked at 2,000 this year. We've probably supported over 200, but we need to move to 20,000 by the end of the decade per annum if we're going to make our big visionary goal happen. And we obviously have our own work plans and OKRs and all that stuff, but I just wanted to emphasize our theory of change, which sees the entrepreneur and financial innovation as the key to success. And if our teams can connect them and be resourceful while seeking the justice and impact that we want in the world, then we'll have a great impact here. I wanted to close just with a thought about COVID and the crisis we've all lived through on Earth in a pandemic that has made us all realize we really are here together on a spaceship called Earth. And the finding of a group of experts that looked at all the many policy options that politicians and industrialists and rich people and philanthropists and poor people and grassroots organizations have at their disposal coming out of COVID, trying to stitch together a better economy that will meet the needs of the many, redress some of the inequities, including in health provision that we've seen through the pandemic, and make the world a better place. And the conclusion of these experts by their votes on the poll that was done in a paper that is summarized here at this website that I've cited is that the 2 highest impact things on both climate and long run benefits to the community that we can possibly do on Earth as countries, as communities, as cities, as states, whatever level of polity you want to redress the setbacks we've had this decade, this year so far to start this decisive decade on climate. The 2 best things you can do are clean energy infrastructure investment and clean R&D spending. This is where New Energy Nexus lives. Y&T is basically what we do. We build the human infrastructure, the talent, the entrepreneurs, the founders, the starters, the startup leaders that are going to make small businesses grow large while delivering incredible clean energy infrastructure over the next decades, and use the R&D spending and support of budgets of governments around the world to innovate our way out of the problem that we've created through climate change by fossil fuels and get the solutions that we need. So just want to re-emphasize that what we're doing is what the world needs. And our team, who you'll see in a video in a little minute here, and who you'll hear from for the next 6 weeks with the Accelerate Energy series, and all the allies and partners are doing this incredible work in the world. With that, welcome to New Energy Nexus.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's really great to here and just sort of orient ourselves in what we're here to talk about and the mission that I think we all are here to do on Spaceship Earth. So we really wanted to highlight New Energy Nexus and the people who work at New Energy Nexus. And as you could see from the map that Danny shared, we are incredibly diverse and global and distributed. And we really wanted everyone to come up here and share a little bit about what they do. But that would easily take us into the next 10 hours. So we put together a bit of a taste of what New Energy Nexus does in different regions and across different impact areas. So I wanted to share a quick video. And of course, I'm going to try to do technical things while also keeping your attention. So bear with me here. All right, so I will share. And here we go. Enjoy.
Terima kasih. My name is Dianto Imam. I'm a program director of New Energy Nexus Indonesia. With the generous gift, we are able to reach out to 2,000 local clean energy entrepreneurs a month through meetups, bootcamps, and hackathons.
Hi everyone, I'm Ping from New Energy Nexus Thailand. Within these few months, we support 6 startups and around 200 students and young entrepreneurs in Thailand to gain more awareness about clean energy and to support them in their energy project in this ecosystem as well. So we're doing this by creating acceleration program and around 4 startup bootcamps in all regions in Thailand. So about our favorite impact story is that by the end of our last cohort, there's one founder who came to tell us that she is very thankful for the workshop that we implemented her skill. So she knows exactly who is the right customer for her startup. And right now she can reach a very big partner in Thailand to do the project together. Also, she will be more than happy to help out in the next cohort, and she would love to help us to find more university partners to create another bootcamp as well. Yeah, that's about our story. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brenda from New Energy Nexus Philippines, and we are building the country's energy innovation ecosystem by helping students and professionals understand the energy community and empower them to take action through entrepreneurship. Our capacity building programs have enabled people to play an active role in the clean energy transition. The work that we have done in just a year has resulted to hundreds of people taking interest in clean energy and energy entrepreneurship.
Hello, this is Loren Lagarda from New Energy Nexus India. It's been 4 years since we started the journey with the New Energy Nexus in India, with the first solar hackathon in the country. And we've come a fair way since, having supported over 400 startups in the last 4 years. Recently, Climate Collective has become New Energy Nexus India for the clean energy space. Our first program here, Electron Vibe, is the first time that we're bringing startups and Indian electric utilities together to spur innovation in the power sector.
Hi, I'm Marvin. One of the things that excites me the most about renewable energy today is the income saved when our end user beneficiaries transition to clean energy. Clean energy enterprises today are enabling customers save as much as 50% of their energy expenditure simply by selling improved cook stoves or solar lanterns at favorable terms.
Hi, welcome to The Clean Fight, helping clean energy startups win in New York. We're a not-for-profit accelerator focused on growth stage companies, and our first cohort is tackling the thorny question, how can we decarbonize New York's buildings in a New York minute? We have an incredible group of customer investor partners committed to help solve this problem, including Tishman Speyer, Boston Properties, Gensler, Turner, Con Ed, Schneider Electric, and many more, with investors ranging from Generate Capital and Breakthrough Energy Ventures to EIP and National Grid partners. As an NYSERDA-funded program, we're also lucky enough to be part of the robust New York clean energy ecosystem, including Urban Future Lab, 76 West, NCore, and Launch NY.
Hello, I'm Yike. In the last 2 years, we connected over 350 EV and battery startup to LG Chem, Hyundai and Kia Motor through an open innovation program known as the Battery Challenge. We also helped 3 corporates to get accelerated access to Lawrence Berkeley National Lab to conduct joint research and development through our Call Charge membership.
All right, thank you all. So that's just a taste of what we do at New Energy Nexus and all around the world. And that doesn't even include several of the other initiatives that we didn't get to mention in that video, such as Third Derivative with Rocky Mountain Institute, the incredible work that happens in China, Vietnam, and California, and all around the world and continuing to grow. So that takes us to what are we doing here? What is Accelerate Energy Series? Well, previously Accelerate Energy Series was actually a summit that happened globally. And given the nature of 2020 and where we're at, we took this opportunity to rethink it and create a series. So we wanted to create an invite-only space for innovators, leaders, accelerators, entrepreneurs to come together and have deep dialogue about the different facets of what we're experiencing. We're hoping that we can learn from each other through these conversations and also make commitments to each other as we move forward. I think 2020 has really highlighted so many things, from collective justice issues and so much more. We're experiencing wildfires all around the world. And so now more than ever, we have to come together to creatively innovate solutions for all. And with that in mind, this series is focusing on the question, how do we accelerate the global clean energy startup ecosystem to be diverse, inclusive, and economically empowering? We have a great lineup of events throughout the month. So here we are at the kickoff, I think. There we go. Here we are today at the kickoff. Later this week, we'll be imagining the clean energy startup ecosystem of 2030, where we'll have a small interactive workshop visioning what the world looks like then, and then creating an action plan to get there. We'll also talk about startups catalyzing energy access in emerging markets, policy and innovation, climate fintech. There's an emerging ecosystem of folks who are ready to channel their resources into climate solutions. So we're going to talk deeply about that and present a report that we're excited about as well. We'll also talk about collaboration between corporates and startups, because now more than ever, collaboration is key. Cooperative mindsets are what is really going to allow us to bring a lot of these solutions into the world. We'll talk about engaging family offices and next-gen investors and how to incorporate an equity lens into entrepreneur support programs. And then we'll round it out with how to fund the energy transition in Southeast Asia and also best practices for accelerating clean energy ventures. So throughout this experience, we're hoping to touch on all facets of an ecosystem, between policy and markets and collaboration between corporates, how we channel resources as well, and then how we all come together. And through all of this, we're also going to be updating a Miro board, and we'll drop the link to it in the chat here. But we want you to follow along. Check out the learnings, check out the artifacts, and let's see what we can do together today and beyond. And on that note, we'll also be live streaming most of this series. So feel free to check us out on YouTube at New Energy Nexus, and we'll drop the links to all of those in the chat as well. So I'd like to welcome to the virtual stage our first speaker, Vic Shao. Vic Shao is CEO of Amply Power, which deploys and operates EV chargers for fleets. Lots of them at a time with really high efficiency and 99.99% uptime reliability. They're at incredibly low cost as well. So Vic founded Amply Power and was previously founder and CEO of Green Charge Networks, which is an energy storage company that was eventually acquired by Engie in 2016. So he oversaw the energy storage development for Engie, and he is also an alum of Berkeley, go Bears. And he's here to share a little bit more about his perspective about what it means to be a part of the clean energy ecosystem in 2020. So with that, I'll take it over to you. Thank you so much, Vic.
Thank you. That was a lovely introduction, and thanks for having me here today to talk about clean energy and what I see, coming into play over the coming decade. I have been in this for some time, and almost as long as Danny has, but not quite. So that would make me a dinosaur or something, and it will make Danny even an older dinosaur. But in any case, here is my 3 predictions for the coming decade in the 20s. And as long as I have been in this, I find the coming 10 years to be a tremendously exciting times. And just some data points I'm gonna tell you about throughout the next 20 minutes or so. First up, my first prediction, if you will. I think that over the next 10 years, energy generation will become almost too cheap to meter. And let me explain that, and let me show you some data around this. But the big caveat here is that while energy may be almost free, distributing it may end up costing all of us more if we're not careful. But here's the interesting energy generation data, and a lot of you have seen or heard of these numbers before, but I'm trying to condense all of that into one slide for you. So this is solar PPA pricing all around the world over the last 7 years, and most recently, a few months ago, Portugal, the country of Portugal, set a new world record, 1.31 cents per kilowatt hour. Let me give you a perspective on this. 1.31 cents per kilowatt hour, that encompasses building a brand new power plant, right? Hundreds of megawatts, brand new power plant from scratch, from dirt. If you compare that to some other forms of energy, let's start with coal. Coal. Forget about the coal plant, but just processing coal, digging it out of the ground, running it through the power plant, heating up water and steam and all of that, the marginal fueling cost of coal is about 3.3 cents a kilowatt hour. Natural gas is even more, above 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And, the last data point I'll present is energy efficiency. So this is not even, generating new power. This is just simply using less. The price for administering a energy efficiency program to use less energy costs 2.7 cents a kilowatt hour. In other words, forget about using less. Let's just go nuts. Let's turn on all the lights. Let's use as much energy as possible. I mean, energy is going to be almost too cheap to meter in the coming decade. Let me show you another representation of this, and you'll find this interesting as well. This goes back, 70 years to 1949. This is the pricing for energy, price, real in real dollar terms per million BTUs of energy across coal, natural gas, oil, Brent oil, liquefied natural gas, and solar. So you see everything else kind of bouncing around down there. And here comes solar. It's like a kid with a crayon just scroll down the page. And it doesn't even seem real how quickly the pricing of solar, if you look at it in time scale of 60 years, 70 years, it almost doesn't seem real that it's just fallen like a rock, and you can see where it's going. It's heading down to zero. And that's just the reality. I mean, as we get better and better at deploying solar and standardizing the processes, economies of scale of manufacturing, the marginal cost of processing the fuel becomes more and more impactful on the total overall cost. And so we all of us know, I mean, there is no marginal cost when it comes to renewable energy, solar or wind, compared to fossil fuel. So that's why it's going to zero. So my prediction over the next 10 years, energy is going to be too cheap to meter. Second prediction, and what I said earlier about grid upgrades and distribution, I think there is going to be a world of innovation in this area, in the area of, instead of a utility rate-based model for upgrading utility infrastructure, hardware infrastructure, it is going to be, we're going to do it much smarter, using software, using energy storage to do it much more efficiently, much cheaply. And let me give you another piece of data. This is from Con Edison of New York, so right from New York City. They called it a low duration curve. And you can find a similar representation from utilities all across the world. This is the number of megawatts of power as experienced by the distribution grid for a certain number of hours in a year. So, so on average, the New York Con Edison grid, the power level, the throughput level, is right around 6 gigawatts, 7 gigawatts. But in hot summer, late afternoon, hot summers, the power level surges, of course, because of air conditioning loads and whatnot. But what is remarkable and fascinating is that, it doubles to 12 gigawatts, 13 gigawatts for a very small percentage of time. So above 13 gigawatts is 7 hours in a year, and there are 8,760 hours, right, in a given year. So above 12 gigawatts is total of 36 hours, and so on and so forth. In other words, about 1.7% of the hours there are in a year drives about $1 billion of grid upgrade costs, and that's purely a brute force hardware-based approach. This is steel in the ground, copper in the ground, transformers, beefier cables than it's necessary. It's not smart. This is how it's been done for decades and decades, going back 100 years in New York's case. But it's not a sustainable way of upgrading the grid. And as we have all seen recently, California, you heard about the wildfires, of course. Stage 3 emergency, right? This is the first time California ISO has enacted that in 20 years, going back to the Enron market manipulation days. There's never been a stage 3 emergency up until recently. And so the old way of upgrading the distribution grid, transmission grid using hardware is not sustainable, and it's not going to work going forward, especially as you know, in the era of heat waves and wildfires. In the US, the regulatory agency did something pretty remarkable recently, and that is allowing distributed energy resources, storage, solar, EVs to participate in the wholesale market. And I think that's going to unlock a lot of innovation, but nonetheless, there is a significant amount of work to be done. And I'll use the case of demand response to drive home the point. In pretty much all the utilities around the US that I'm aware of course, there are production scale demand response programs. In other words, the utilities in hot summer afternoons will trigger an event and ask large commercial users to use less energy. So demand response program, that's very commonplace these days. But exactly how much reduction in demand and in which feeder and which network transformer on the grid, we don't know. The utilities don't know. The distribution engineers over there really don't know. All they can say to themselves is, well, it's going to be better with demand response than without, but how much better? It's a mystery. So this is just the state of the art, right? It's certainly progress, but a lot more work to be done so that it's a real-time transactive distribution grid that we have. So all of this is coming from software, right? It's not a hardware-based approach, more copper, more transformers and whatnot. In the meanwhile, if you couple that software with energy storage, which is the industry that I came from right before Amply, 10 years in energy storage. Over those 10 years, storage costs have dropped by almost 10x, right? So this scenario enables a solution, a localized, regionalized solution instead of long transmission line runs. It enables an economic scenario where you could deploy storage, deploy software locally, and pump more kilowatt hours of energy through assets that's already deployed by the utilities. So this is I think a smarter approach for upgrading the grid, and we'll see a lot of innovation in the coming decade in the space. Finally, my last set of predictions has to do with job creation and what I view as being the driver for tech growth in not only Silicon Valleys but tech hubs all around the world. So for those of you, maybe Danny obviously can resonate with this, but for anybody else on the call, that remembers in the 90s and Yahoo and Microsoft and eBay, and just remember those days of early internet creativity and early internet innovations and the level of optimism that's around the tech hubs, Silicon Valley, of course, but also around the world. I believe that sort of dynamics, that sort of optimism, innovation is going to be centered around clean tech in the coming decade. And this is going to be the economic driver for job creation, for economic value. It's going to be around clean tech. It's not going to be around web apps and mobile apps and social networks anymore. I think the 2020s will be the decade for clean tech for a number of reasons, but primarily is because the opportunity is so immense. So let me run you through some data here on this point. So in California, where I reside, our governor most recently, about a month ago, decided to phase out internal combustion engines altogether. So by the year 2035, In California, new cars can no longer be powered by gasoline. It has to be zero emissions. Think about what that means. California is the fifth, if California was a country, is the fifth largest economy in the world. So in one fell swoop, we've just decided that the fifth largest economy in the world will no longer operate gasoline vehicles. Think about what that truly means. I mean, the oil and gas industry is a $3.3 trillion industry globally. It's 3.8% of the global economy, employs 4 million people, and hundreds of thousands of businesses all across the world. And the fifth largest economy in the world just decided to drop out of that. So, and it's not just going to be California. I think this transition in transportation is, I mean, there's a movement around this. Even the U.S. being the laggard is taking steps, and California certainly is doing so. So we're going to see a tremendous amount of economic upheaval in transportation, but also in energy. Well, why is there's such a focus in transportation and going electric? Well, let me just point out a few things. Consumer Report in the U.S. is sort of a consumer guide for buying laptops and dishwashers and microwave ovens and also cars in the US. And they came out about a month ago with a report that really confirms what everybody has already suspected, which is operating an electric vehicle just simply costs less on maintenance, on refueling. And so economically, it makes a lot of sense to go electric. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, the cost for electric fuel is only going down, and it's going straight down to zero, right? And I could also imagine a scenario, 5 years from now, maybe it's 10 years from now, the EVs out there, instead of going 200 miles, 300 miles, it's going to be 1,000 miles per charge. In other words, it's going to be a scenario where it's too good for a consumer to pass up. By the year 2035, most definitely, the electric vehicle is simply just going to be a better experience. It's going to be cheaper to operate than gasoline. I mean, would you? Is it more convenient for a consumer to charge and forget about it for the next 1,000 miles versus gasoline, where you have to visit the neighborhood gas station every week? I think I would pick the 1,000-mile option, right? So I can see that it's going to be game over for fossil fuel, and certainly by 2035, but perhaps even sooner than that. So, this is just one example. Transportation is just one example. There are plenty of others. So if you put all of these three items in perspective, I strongly suspect that the 2020s will be remembered in the history of time to be the decade where all of this scales up, and massive amount of innovation, economic upheaval, and growth, job creation. And this is just going to be like, the 1990s with Yahoo and eBay, except in clean tech. As Danny alluded to at the beginning, I'm truly excited about what New Energy Nexus is doing, and the brave goals, the 100,000 startups by 2030. is kind of the the high level objectives that the world needs to realize and to support and to target, because this it's happening this over the next 10 years, with all of these economic opportunities and activities. It's just too good to pass up and to not be involved. So I think Danny and his team is doing the real deal all around the world, and I'm really excited about all the programs and all the startups that are innovating and part of the family, and I look forward to new innovations to come out of New Energy Nexus in the coming 10 years. So I'll stop there and pass it back to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Vic. That was incredible. I'm personally going to go back and review those slides and grab a calculator and make a plan. I am very excited to hear those predictions, and may it be so. Danny, I'll turn it to you to take us through.
Thank you, Neha, and thank you, Vic. And we should have mentioned, of course, in full disclosure up top there, that Vic is the chair of our board. So glad that he agrees with the brave goal that we've set ourselves for the decade to support 100,000 startups, but really pleased to see him sort of stretch our imaginations about what we can do in the decade in terms of the transition and disruption and change that we'll create through this clean energy transition. Right now, it falls on me to introduce our next speaker, which is really exciting for me, a privilege to introduce Deputy Speaker Loren Lagarda from the Philippines. So the Deputy Speaker of the Congress there in the Philippines. And I'm going to cut to the end of the bio. You know, her inspiring advocacy, her bio says, on environmental protection has earned her global recognition. For those of you that are dialing in from the US or elsewhere, then you may not know her as well, but she's basically the Al Gore of the Philippines. You may have seen Loren if you grew up in the Philippines on TV as a newscaster, and then in the rest of the world later in 2014, I think, really became the face of the Philippines as it was going through a huge climate impact from Typhoon Haiyan, and working with the world on the response and the relief required for that. And ever since has been a real champion of resilience in that community and around the world. So just to go through the bio properly, I mean, to pay full respect, as a 20+ year politician in the Senate, initially for 18 years, and now in the House of Representatives of the Philippines, representing her province of Antique. She's also served on a number of international functions with the United Nations as a global champion for resilience, the UNFCCC's National Adaptation Plan champion, Commissioner of the Global Commission on Adaptation, which is part of the Vulnerable States Forum. And she's also been recognized by UNEP as a laureate, the UN Environment Program, and the World Economic Forum as a global leader for tomorrow. As a senator, she chaired committees on finance, foreign relations, as well as climate change, championing this cause for all these years. And as I've said, you know, in the Philippines, this massive country where there are still tens of millions of people without electricity, many tens of millions more with unreliable electricity, expensive power, where they're making the transition to clean energy as quickly as they can, because they recognize the risks from climate change and the need economically to do what Vic said is entirely rational. She's really the champion of that change. I'll mention just in passing that her son is also one of the solar entrepreneurs we seek to support through New Energy Nexus. And so it's in the family, but really wonderful to have Deputy Speaker Loren Lagarda address us to kick off this Accelerate Energy series. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Danny. And I've just been back channeling here with a couple of folks from Deputy Speaker's team, and it seems like she is having some internet issues. So we are going to perhaps, well, we could keep talking about how amazing she is. She does have quite a long bio and Wikipedia page in case anyone is interested. It's unclear to me what she can't do. But we do have a couple of commissioners on the line here who can read this speech. Cherie, if you are here and have any guidance on whether we should just move forward with reading her script, or, oh, yes, I bought us enough time. I see you.
Am I finally here?
Wonderful.
Sorry about that. You're fixing the internet. It's embarrassing to. I see Danny here. Yes. Thank you so much. My audio is clear now, and I'm coming in clear. Very good. So thank you for this. And Danny, amazing work you're doing, not just in California where you are, but also in the Philippines, when you and your family have been to, exploring our islands in the pre-COVID world, but also helping startups. Before I read my prepared message for today, I would just like to say that even before the pandemic, we have the Innovation Act. It would be good to also share the innovation law that the Philippine Congress had done in 2019. In fact, just 1 month before the lockdown, the implementing rules and regulations were signed by the president in February this year. So it's a very new law that really encourages innovation, research and development, and technology, as well as startups, which Danny is advocating. When I actually spoke to Danny several months back, he mentioned about so many Philippine startups that were just mushrooming all over. And I can imagine first how they've been affected, perhaps adversely, by the impact of the lockdown and COVID-19, but perhaps looking at the brighter side, how they've been given this great reset or the pause to be able to innovate more. Because as we all know, this has given us a reason to look closer to nature and to see how important really the transition to renewables is, after having seen how the pandemic is closely related to nature and science and the abuse of our natural wealth. So with that, I would just like to read a prepared message, but short of congratulating your team for being constant and persistent, even during these times of pandemic. So thank you to the New Energy Nexus for inviting me to this kickoff event. I'm pleased to be here as an advocate for high shares of renewable energy and as the Climate Vulnerable Forum Ambassador for Parliaments. The CVF represents 48 developing countries, including the Philippines. I hope the New Energy Nexus helps members of the CVF accelerate progress towards the CVF's unique 100% renewable energy vision, and with it, to create job opportunities and to improve cost competitiveness. The COVID-19 pandemic has created an opportunity for power sector planners and stakeholders to reset energy development policy to enable more renewable absorption by grid systems and to redirect resources to support economic fundamentals and energy price stability. The Philippine Department of Energy, or DOE, revealed that during this COVID-19 induced economic lockdown, electricity demand in our three major island systems fell 30% in Luzon, 17% in the Visayas, and 25% in Mindanao. And this spelled trouble for many smaller islands. As we all know, Philippines is an archipelagic nation of thousands of islands, and it isolated power systems that did not have the negotiating power to risk share with power providers. Without contractual protection and risk sharing, the electricity prices would have increased by 15% in Luzon, 5% in the Visayas. Prior to COVID-19, the Philippines already had one of the most expensive electricity prices in Asia, and that should be not a reason, because we are gifted with free sun and free wind and so much water around us. So if we simply transition to renewable energy from imported coal and imported fossil fuel, for that matter, then energy prices can be lower, cleaner, healthier, and more resilient. Parliaments have done a lot to improve and to move urgent climate action in many countries. We've also used parliaments and our own Congress to spark new ambition and implementation in climate action in the run-up to the global recovery and prosperity. And through my role as Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, after having been in the Senate since 1998, and now a CVF Ambassador for Parliaments, I am hopeful that we can improve and to build on existing policies to open the space for innovation by empowering entrepreneurs to accelerate the energy transition. Modular, domestic and localized renewable energy and green grid investments can ensure energy access and reduce overall system cost while improving domestic energy security and resilience by reducing exposure to international volatility and supply chain risk. Efficient use of power and renewable energy brings cost competitiveness and has been an important job creator. There have been record-breaking deflationary prices of renewable energy and storage. And in April of 2020, global levelized cost of energy benchmarks for utility scale batteries with a 4-hour duration, including charging costs, were cost competitive with fossil gas peaker plants. Moreover, there have been examples of solar plants providing grid services at commercial rates while performing better than fast fossil gas turbine technologies. However, we are not on track to limiting warming in line with the Paris Agreement goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Over 350 million people across CVF countries still lack access to energy. In our country alone, over 2 million people lack access to power, and tens of millions more do not have reliable access to electricity. The off-grid and community-scale areas in the Philippines powered by diesel generators using imported oil represents a high degree of exposure to ill-prepared supply chains, lack of digitization, and volatile commodity prices. As a result, only 14% of the off-grid areas have access to 24 hours of electricity, while the rest remain underserved or totally unserved. This, while renewable energy is already less than 2/3 the cost of imported oil. Access to 24 hours of electricity is important, especially in times of crisis, such as storing medical and food supplies. The current power system lock-in is unsustainable and built on the false premise that fossil fuel is cheap and reliable. If it was either of those things, why is it costing the world $3.1 trillion in subsidies per year? This is over 20 times the level of support to renewable energy. It is time to drive investment for low-cost renewable energy. Power sector planners often assume that a system biased towards baseload fossil fuel generators would deliver benefits from scale. This planning norm is likely now being reconsidered in light of evidence that too high of a fossil fuel mix results in system lock-in due to inflexible contractual obligations that require baseload dispatch, even when new lower cost renewables can reduce system prices. Unfortunately, this lock-in problem is worse for countries that import coal, such as Vietnam, the Philippines, or Bangladesh, due to exposure to price volatility and negative effects on the trade balance. This lock-in problem rings true for fossil gas, example, natural gas, which requires a large infrastructure build of regasification units, associated pipelines, retail connections, and storage units. Because fossil gas is neither incremental nor economical without scale, it will require the same capital recovery guarantees as coal and oil-fired generation. Moreover, taking into consideration the financial lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, power sector planners may wish to enable investment in greater domestic energy security and system flexibility, as well as take advantage of the deflationary price trajectory of renewable energy and storage. In addition to a cost-competitive and resilient power system, it is important to highlight the role of financial regulators, investors, bankers. Specifically, financial regulators have a responsibility to safeguard the financial system from the evolving material risks, including non-performing stranded asset risk. And responsible managers in investment companies and banks have a fiduciary duty to factor in known financial risks. Signals from financial regulators such as our central bank and the Securities and Exchange Commission and corporations to ensure that finance increases social and infrastructure resilience to new risks and opportunities are part of the forward-looking leadership needed to keep pace with innovation and to support sustainable growth. Future signals from power sector policymakers, regulators, and stakeholders, including innovators from the New Energy Nexus, can rapidly support these gains by improving the design of the power market to ensure system flexibility and encourage energy security through domestic renewable energy. We must begin reallocating capital and enable investments in renewable energy. Decisive leadership by countries together is key to shifting the market structure and economies towards a high renewable energy future. Providing international support to buy down the cost of capital is urgently needed to unlock more renewable energy installation projects, given the large proportion of upfront capital needed for renewables compared with other energy investments. The V20, Vulnerable 20 Finance Ministers of the CBF, have developed a unique initiative called Accelerated Financing Mechanism, AFM, to scale up blended financing for overcoming high capital costs for renewable energy. And we call for international funding and support to help it succeed. We need a renewable energy system to leverage homegrown power from our own domestic renewable energy resources that makes energy affordable to everyone, and so makes energy also universally accessible, reliable, resilient to disasters. And renewables, we know, offer all of this. And so we look to robust initiatives such as the New Energy Nexus and international partnerships to follow through. In the Philippines, new catalysts for change are coming as a result of our Electric Power Industry Reform Law, or the EPIRA. This also validates the Philippine government's intention to spur competition through transparent bidding to reduce electric prices for consumers and industry. More retail competition and open access is in the cards for the Philippines, and its interaction with deflationary renewable energy means faster access to lower cost RE. I encourage the New Energy Nexus and its entrepreneurs to engage in accelerating retail competition and open access to deliver low-cost power prices to consumers and industry. I would like to take this opportunity to invite the New Energy Nexus investors and technology providers here today to interface with the CBF on our climate prosperity plans to drive climate solutions in vulnerable nations towards climate prosperity. As we urge towards a better normal at the global level, equipping our countries and communities with affordable, accessible, and reliable power will be the key to helping embrace new opportunities for prosperity that would bring about resilience and stability, especially for small businesses and vulnerable rural populations. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening. I congratulate you for your constancy in moving forward our shared advocacy on renewable energy, innovation, and research and development. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. I'm feeling inspired and excited, and also really looking forward to the future that I think we will be building. Climate prosperity for all is something that I don't think we can compromise on for anyone. So I urge everyone to, take heed and really make the commitment that we can together to build this world for all. It's not going to be easy, but we can make it fun. We have a couple of minutes in case there are any questions from the audience. There is a Q&A button if you want to put your questions there, or feel free to type them in the chat. I guess I'll get us kicked off with a question. I like to really think about the more beautiful future. And it's really hard when there are so many things happening day in and day out, and it's easy to focus on the terrible things. So when we think about the year 2030, and Loren and Vic, this is specifically for you both, what is the most exciting part of your day when you wake up in 2030?
Wow, good question. Most exciting part of my day. Well, it's just never having to turn off a light switch ever, and just keeping all keeping all my appliances and electric cars running and plug in any time of the day. But look, I mean, I think honestly, I do foresee a scenario where by 2030, energy will be almost free. And it is up to the innovators in the coming decade to solve the software problem and the communication and controls problems to create regionalized grid infrastructure, not using hardware but using software and storage and innovations. And a lot of that, by the way, will come from places like Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, India, Indonesia. I mean, it's, I think a lot of the innovations and a lot of the work actually is going to come from places outside of the US. So I'm particularly excited about that aspect of what's going to unfold in the next 10 years. Loren, any thoughts?
Yes, well, as I said, in the Philippines, our natural resources are abundant. It is really changing the mindset of the leadership in the executive department, and also convincing the financial institutions, including banks. If only financial institutions would declare that they would no longer lend to fossil fuel, then that changes the scenario. But oftentimes, and I have to be very candid about it, lending to renewables while it has greatly improved, also sometimes banks make it more difficult and even ask for other collateral aside from the project itself. While if they were lending to fossil fuel, more particularly coal, the project in itself would be the equity. And so while it's nothing new and it's been here for decades since the renewable energy law in the Philippines was enacted in 2007, been 13 years, but changing the mindset of political leaders, leaders in the executive department who lead the energy transition or even the mix, and traditional financial institutions need to be not just educated, but concretize it in actual action. Many countries in the world have declared a shift, closing coal plants dramatically. But let's compute the energy coming from fossil fuel in these countries. There still is much. What I can say is that there's much drama when countries declare no to coal. What kind of other mitigation policies they have done so that we meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius as enshrined in the Paris Agreement, which the Philippines had much to do with during the negotiations. Now back to my country, the situation is greatly improved. And the shift to renewables is not just forthcoming, but already ongoing because of the drastic drop in the cost of materials, equipment, of energy itself, brought up by the lowering prices in the world market. But the mindset still has to be changed. And at the end of the day, it's a matter of cost. And because solar, because other forms of renewable energy have drastically dropped, it has made it more competitive now as compared to coal and natural gas and others. But it's just the beginning. I would want to see a more dramatic and a bigger transition. I would like people looking at coal and be embarrassed about it. I would like banks to say, no, we don't, and be embarrassed about it. I'd like to have a shame campaign of those in this COVID world who still support fossil fuel. We saw how the skies turned blue. We saw how the birds started to chirp. We saw how the air is cleaner. At least I speak from where I sit in the urban area in Metro Manila. And I used to watch the birds in the first few weeks of the lockdown. They're gone now because traffic is back. So urban mobility, the use of so much fossil fuel, I hope that this great reset, the pause, however unfortunate, should be seized by the world as a reason to hasten and drastically do the transition to renewables. It's actually a no-brainer, and I don't want to preach to the crowd because all of us share the same mindset, and I really want and wish that those who have the purse and the resources would not support, to put it very bluntly, would not support dirty energy, which adversely affects the poor, which I'll stop at that. And so that simplifies my long message that now is a time for us to shift. In fact, yesterday was the time. Now is a time to enjoy it, because the 1.5 degree will not happen. I'm certain it will not happen. Why? Because even if the Philippines does, we're only less 1/3 of 1%. So, but we have to do our share.
Great. Thank you, Loren. Hendrik here from the New Energy Nexus team. Please, people, still add questions through the chat. There's a Q&A chat as well as just a regular chat. I have one question here from Kevin Dobson. I think it'd be good for Vic to answer. Is there enough lithium, copper, cobalt, aluminium, and rare earth materials to successfully accomplish this task? And particularly also relationship to the waste that's generated by all the solar panels, batteries, and electric cars that are going to be built. There's a question I often get from friends as well when I evangelize about clean energy. Vic, is this a problem? How do we solve it?
I'll defer to Elon and to Danny on the question about lithium. But as it turns out, I mean, there is actually a tremendous amount of lithium that's easily mineable, much easier than fossil fuel. In fact, there's a tremendous amount of it. I think Elon Musk at Battery Day says something to the effect: does the state of Nevada in the U.S. has enough lithium to convert all the cars, hundreds of millions of them in the U.S. to electric? I don't know if he's just bluffing, but I don't know if that's if he is stretching the truth a bit, but I do believe that it's not an order of magnitude off, even if it is a stretch. So there is definitely some reality to that. In terms of copper, aluminum, I don't think it actually requires mining. Of course, the world will continue to mine copper and aluminum and all the other industrial metals. However, I think there's actually a much greater opportunity in recycling what we have already mined and to do a much better job processing it. So I also see a high degree of innovation coming from the recycling space over the next 10 years. I'd like to see more portfolio companies of New Energy Nexus doing that, serving that function, because I think there's a lot to be done there.
Great. Danny, you want to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add to Vic's point that I think the renewable energy abundance that could be generated in the next decade is one where we're dependent largely on silicon as the raw material for solar panels and lithium as the raw material for batteries. We can get cobalt out of the batteries and most of the other rare earths ultimately and just use the lithium. And both silicon and lithium are entirely recyclable, to Vic's point. So you've got like a circular economy potential here where we can build enough generating capacity in solar panels, enough storage capacity in batteries with lithium, and actually reuse it, or with vanadium as another product that is useful for energy storage, which is entirely recyclable with no depletion. And that does require enormous innovation. And this is the innovation we still need to spawn in our economy. And that's what our entrepreneurs are all about. But 30, 40 years from now, imagining a world that is fully solar powered with some wind and some other stuff, but using the copper and the aluminium and the lithium and the silicon inputs that were generated by extraction in the 20th century is not a ridiculous vision. It's entirely doable and the most economic way to continue to drive down this cost that Vic's been talking about and to achieve this sort of climate prosperity for all that Loren was talking about. I think, technologically, that's all doable. There is plenty of lithium in the system or can be extracted and then used continuously through recycling and circular economy models. So yeah, it's a great time. I have a question actually for Loren, if I may, just because it was so great to hear such a strong-willed speech from such a prominent politician in such an important country as the Philippines. And I just wanted to ask what the vulnerable 20 countries want in terms of the blended capital point that you made. I know you've been on the finance committees in Congress and represented the country in the Green Climate Fund. Is there something that we should be advocating for with, a new government here in the United States, if that happens, or with China and the Belt and Road where we work, or other countries that we may have the conversations with financiers and development banks and the like?
Yes, well, the CVF composed of more than 40 countries, and the V20 of the 20 finance ministers of these 40 countries simply advocate for more technical assistance. There's no exact number on how much on technical and financial assistance for the members of the CVF, so that both mitigation and adaptation projects in these countries can continue. They have access to Green Climate Fund, to various funding available, but this is a very arduous process, and it takes years to get a proposal approved. And by the time it's approved, for them to download it to the respective countries is another hurdle. And so the V20 and the CVF countries in general, as well as parliaments of the CVF, wish that developed nations would make good and measure their emissions so that the 1.5 degrees commitment in the Paris Agreement is adhered to. Now, how to go about it in a scientific manner, that's for the industrialized nations to measure by closing coal, by transitioning many years ago. That's a good way forward. But to actually measure their NDC, their nationally determined contributions, so that it is attuned to the 1.5 degree Celsius commitment, that's for the developed countries to ascertain. And so in gist, the V20 and the CVF countries in general are asking those who have caused this all, and it's definitely not the vulnerable nations whose contribution to greenhouse gas emissions is less than 1%, insofar as my country is concerned, to transition quick and to give assistance to those who are direly in need. In terms of numbers, I'll have to get back with you on that, because it would be difficult for me to give certain demands or commitments. I don't think it works that way, but it's a general plea.
Great, thank you. Another question for Vic, before we go to another final question from Sharon, and maybe we can close with all panelists. Vic, you haven't said so much about your company Amply yet. I'm curious, you mentioned we're like in the 90s, where the first tech companies were coming up, and clean tech is going to do that. And if you look actually at the stock market, not only Tesla, solar companies are actually some of the best performing companies at the moment. So maybe you're already there. So I'm curious, as if your company is going to be the next Google or the next Facebook, and how would you see expanding into other markets around the world beyond what you're doing now in the US?
Yeah, I mean, we're already having conversations with utilities around the world, and electric transportation is going to be one of the big growth industries in the 20s. I mean, just converting. Another data point that I should mention is that transportation, at least in the US, is 29% of all energy usage. So that includes heating and cooling. That includes, industrial energy uses, all the buildings, energy uses, all across the board. Transportation is 29% of all energy uses. So it's a massive, massive number that's gonna get converted from oil and gas and fossil fuel into electricity. So I think it's going to be there will be a lot of activities in electric transportation, but it's not only electric transportation. I saw another question coming across a little while ago about, when will we have 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour, 24 hours by 24 by 7. When I was at Engie, we did a study into this on solar storage, wind-powered renewable energy, and the ability to sign a 20-year PPA contract at that price point, 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour figure. And the year that we arrived at was around 2026. And it's not 24 hours, it's more like 18 hours. So skip, from 11 p.m. until 5 a.m. time frame. It's still going to, in the middle of the night, in other words, it's still going to be difficult because the storage bank won't last that long to cover for the in the middle of the night. So we're relying on hydro, we're relying on wind, perhaps, depending on the geography, to cover for that period of time. But just solar and storage, we can do 18 hours at 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour starting in 2026, 2027. So again, there's going to be a significant amount of innovation there, not to mention long duration storage, which a few companies out there are trying to innovate on. So we may get there earlier, but it's all going to happen in the 20s.
Thank you. And then the final question for Loren, a question from Sharon Thompson in the chat. She's very inspired and is curious about what the young people of today can do and how parents and educators can support them. So what's the role of young people? How can they play a role in this energy transition, and how can we as parents and educators support them?
Thank you. Well, we have the Environment Education Awareness Act, where environment issues, which I hope it also includes the transition to renewable energy, is being taught in school. But what can young people do, considering they're in school, considering that now online learning is ongoing with the pandemic? Well, just talking about it in social media. So much of Facebook is being used, Instagram, Twitter, all online webinars, even just chatting. I'm not saying that what they're chatting about is inconsequential, but if the peg of discussions could be the importance of the air we breathe, the cleanliness of the water around us, the utilization of energy accessible to us rather than importing expensive, dirty coal. I'm not certain if a 15-year-old could speak this way, but it can be simplified. Let's say for artists, for example, if drawings and animation can be done to simplify messages that we've talked about now, if it needs to be amplified and to resonate with the young in the language that they would understand, whether it could be in an art form, it could be in the digital world, it could be an online platform where in a language they all understand. I would like to see 21 years old, 18 years old, let's say 15 to 24, maybe have an Energy Nexus discussion of the very young, and how even a 10-year-old, drawings, animation, social media, webinars on how important, because transitioning, when we talk about, for example, when I speak about, I was responsible for putting in the coal tax, first time in the history of our country. But how would a 15-year-old understand this? I need someone in that age to communicate this in a simple, understandable way to say that I did this for you. I did this for the children, the age of Danny Kennedy's children who visit our islands and enjoy it. They say, how? How does it connect? That putting a tax on coal is for the future of the youth of today. So perhaps a communication campaign and a social media platform for the very, very young. We're all young, but those much younger than us. So that's a suggestion. Also, we should go, I know that the focus is transitioning to renewable energy, but everything is connected. Even waste segregation, that's where I'm an expert at because that's my law, ecological solid waste management. And that I am able to operationalize in very simple terms, even in Tagalog or Filipino, our local language, and how the importance of recycling, segregation of waste at source, recycling, and composting. That I'm able to do because when I authored the law in 1998 and it was enacted in 2001, almost 20 years ago, it was also difficult to understand. But in the past decades, I'm able to operationalize even holding up recycled bottles and holding up compost made from food waste and saying no to single-use plastic. So in 20 years, I'm able to simplify my law. Now, all these technical discussions, even my quite technical highbrow speech, so to speak, how do we simplify that to an 18-year-old in different languages, in Filipino, in our different dialects and languages, in your different languages? How do we do that? That's the challenge. And to highlight the startups. I have a weekly just a conversation on Zoom, streamed on Facebook Live, called The Stories for a Better Normal, which was born out of the bill passed on third reading in the House of Representatives, pending now in the Senate, where we talk about the world in the better normal, in the new norm. And so perhaps I could select 2 or 3 amazing startups of youths of not of the young in the Philippines, not very privileged, but who have really done innovation and feature them there. So what we need to do is really to focus on the doables. When corporations or even moneyed groups or NGOs well established by the taipans have innovation companies or startups, that's probably difficult to do. But when it's, for example, an indigenous person that does it, when perhaps it could be someone from Tondo or from Smoky Mountain or from Payatas, from the dumps, or informal settler does it, or if it's, let's say, a teenager who has no resources. So I would like those stories. So it makes our conversation more understandable, reachable, attainable. These conversations are good, no doubt. These conversations are excellent. Technical, scientific, encouraging investments, lauding startups, that's very, very good. But to reach perhaps a greater audience in our respective communities and countries, we can simplify and use the creative industries.
Sounds good.
Suggestion.
Amazing. Vic, were you going to say something?
No, great points.
Yeah.
Great points.
Wow. Yeah, I think, we're seeing such inspiration from our youth as well. And I really tend to think of children as our elders in that way. And when we think about ourselves here, we can think about the future ancestors that we would like to be. What are the tools? How are we empowering people? How are we allowing for these creativity and collaboration? And I think that's a perfect tone to sort of take us into the rest of Accelerate Energy series, as we find the different ways and the different modalities, from technical discussions to discussions around culture and policy. How do we empower all facets of this to really have 100% clean energy for 100% of humanity? I'm going to drop in a couple of links if you'd like to stay in touch with what's happening with Accelerate Energy series. I'll put those in the chat. And before we go off, I just want to have a big, virtual round of applause to Danny Kennedy, Vic Shao, and Loren Lagarda, Deputy Speaker Loren Lagarda. Thank you so much for your wisdom. Vic, thank you so much for everything you shared with us. I think seeing those numbers really makes it it's tactile. We can really feel that it is close, it's here. And Danny, thank you so much for your commitment and really allowing for so many tools and people all over the world to come together to bring this vision to life. All of you who are dialing in and watching us on the live stream, thank you for being here with us. And if you have any questions, I'll drop some information in the chat. Stay tuned. New Energy Nexus, YouTube, watch the Miro board, and let's do this. 100% for the 100%. I'll turn it to you, Danny or Hendrik, if you have any other thoughts.
Just a reminder also to join our online Slack community, where there will be a channel specifically for the AES, so you can continue chatting with participants here over the next 5-6 weeks during the Accelerate Energy series. Thanks, everybody.
I'll just finish by saying thank you, Hendrik. Thank you, Neha. Thank you, Olivia, in the background doing the technical, everyone who's produced this whole series. There's 6 weeks now of these great sessions. Get involved, get online, get in the Slack community. And finally, again, thank you to the chair of our board, Vic Shao, and Deputy Speaker Loren Lagarda. That was awesome. Thank you so much for kicking us off, keeping us going, keeping us inspired. We will continue to accelerate this energy transition with this series. So good night. Thank you.
Good night there. Good morning. Good noon here. Yes.
Good day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Danny. Thank you.